I'm Mandy Gunasekara filling in for Gerard today, and we're so excited that you have tuned in. We're coming at you live from the Element Wealth Studio. If you are thinking about or planning for retirement, do you have a plan? Go to myelementwealth.com or call 601-957-6006 to let Element Wealth help you find your balance between income growth and guarantees. And just to remind y'all, I finally got it up and running on my end. I know y'all have been engaging with our C-Spire text line, 601-879-4395. Please don't text and drive, but do share your thoughts. Send it in. I love getting the feedback. All right, I'm very excited to introduce y'all to our next guest. Is someone I've known for at least 17 years. I've been married to him for 16, but it's my husband, Surya Gunasekara. Outside of being my husband, he is usually the man behind the curtain. He is a strategist. He worked in Capitol Hill for President Trump. He served at the Department of Energy in the international office. So we could talk a little bit about the energy, the international energy outlook, but he also spent the majority of his time working at Customs and Border Protection, building more miles of wall. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then he was slated actually for a slot that didn't ultimately come to fruition because we didn't win officially the 2020 election. He was slated to go work at the National Security Council. So Surya, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mandy, for forcing me on to this show with you.
It's true. He didn't really have a choice. I've been wanting him to come on for quite some time, but he's got so much to offer. And one of the things, let's just start off with this. You've been watching the cabinet post the announcements coming from President Trump. You and I both have our Truth Social alerts on, and one of the first ones we saw was the announcement of Tom Homan to be the border czar for President Trump. You worked with him. What do you think? What is your reaction to someone like Tom, and then specifically for him to be overseeing the mass deportation effort that we know is going to happen?
So I didn't work directly for Tom. He had actually stepped down as the acting ICE director right before I joined Customs and Border Protection, but he has a distinguished career in border enforcement. He is absolutely the right man for the job to lead this team that also includes Stephen Miller, who I did have the opportunity to work with when he was at the White House in the last administration.
He was one of your biggest allies.
He was a great ally, along with one of our other friends, John Zadrozny. Those two were always in the room making decisions that really were able to keep our border safe during COVID, that were the key drivers between some of the biggest policies like Remain in Mexico and Title 42. These things really allowed us to have these historic gains of border security in the first Trump administration. And then Kristi Noem, who will be the DHS secretary, like that is a huge job. I had an opportunity to work with her in the House. She was on the Ways and Means Committee, which has oversight of trade, including Customs and Border Protection, and she will be a fantastic Homeland Security Secretary, much better than the current one, Mayorkas, who should be impeached. But fortunately, the voters have done that for us, and he will be gone at noon.
He's fired.
He's fired.
Yeah.
Y'all fired.
y'all fired. It's plural form this time. Thank you to the voters for delivering that win. But going back to when you were at CBP, one of the things that we talked a lot about that folks may not be read into was the State Department. They had a role in some of these policies, and they regularly got in the way. So read a little bit into what were some of the issues they were constantly trying to thwart, and how it's not just DHS and the border czar, but the State Department, their role, and your idea for having some sort of czar that oversees some of the three key main areas and elements of the border situation.
Yeah, exactly. So I think Stephen Miller is now in the right place as Deputy Chief of Policy to make sure that what was happening in the first administration won't be repeated. And what we saw happen was in Mexico, we had a really talented political ambassador who was effectively able to negotiate with the government of Mexico our Remain in Mexico policy, we didn't have the same type of political leadership in the Northern Triangle countries of Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. And that really handicapped our ability to get things done, negotiate deals with them. In fact, they would often go to the governments behind our back and basically be like, President Trump's not going to win. You don't need to do this. And so I had floated towards the end of the administration the idea of a special envoy to the Northern Triangle, a political appointee who would basically be over the career ambassadors. And I think a lot of people don't understand that, there are U.S. ambassadors in, 180 countries. The vast majority of them are career Foreign Service officers, many of whom, are good, hardworking people, but some who are just ideologically opposed and will resist the will of the voters and ultimately the Trump policies. I hope that changes this time around, and I think that with Tom Homan and Stephen Miller in that place and Marco Rubio taking over State Department, there can be accountability for those people who are, in the resistance movement, and we can really assert, the will of the voter in these agencies.
Yeah, interestingly enough, this resistance movement is taking on it's just taking on its own momentum. It's now being organized. I think there's the name of an organization led by Jared Polis and Pritzker. This is Colorado and Illinois Democrat governors that have established this Governors Save America. That's the slight paraphrase. I'll look it up and I'll tell the listeners. But this resistance movement, I don't think that they're going to be as successful this time. What are your thoughts on that? And do you think that the people the president is appointing to these various positions, not just when it comes to the border, they're going to be better equipped to push back against this building momentum that's occurring both at the career level but also at the national political level by virtue of organization among the governors and the Democrat attorneys generals?
Yeah, so that's a lot to unpack there, Mandy.
It was. But start where you want to.
Let me start with the state resistant movement. I think a lot of the lawfare that we saw in the first Trump administration, a lot of the teeth of that has been knocked out with a rash of Supreme Court decisions, West Virginia v. EPA, Loper Bright, which undid Chevron. This more recent federal D.C. Circuit case that undid a lot of the NEPA environmental requirements. Look, I think the lawfare will exist. I think Democrat governors will do what they need to do to really. I just view that as jockeying for 2028.
Yeah.
I don't think there's really a clear Democrat frontrunner. I think. It's Gavin Newsom and Jared Polis would like to see themselves as that. Maybe Pritzker. He's a billionaire, so.
What does he have to lose?
What does he have to lose? He has to lose a lot of weight. That's for sure.
That's true.
But other than that, So obviously there will be resistance. I think we're more prepared for it. I think what this Trump campaign in 2024 has done is just really built a lot of armor. They're ready for it, and they put key people in place. I have more confidence in Bill McGinley, who was announced as the White House counsel, and that is a huge role. Bill was the White House secretary, which is arguably one of the most important jobs in the White House. You are basically the paper filter for the president. Anything that gets to the Resolute desk has to go by you. So Bill had a huge job in the first Trump administration, and he is perfect for this White House counsel role. That is really a place where you can push back on some of these crazy lawfare. If Matt Gaetz is confirmed, I assume that he will have a DOJ that will, fight hard against anything that the Democrat attorneys generals or governors can put together.
Yeah, so a great, experienced crew that we know has one of the most important characteristics we talk a lot about, which is courage to do the right thing when you actually get that opportunity. Really quick, what do you think the probability of Matt Gaetz getting confirmed is?
0 through advice and consent, but I think that he'll be confirmed via recess appointment, which is in the Constitution, Article 2, Section 2, Clause 3. Our founders put it there for a reason. Anyone who stands in the way of that is violating the Constitution.
They're acting unconstitutionally.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Surya, for joining us. For our listeners, we've got to take a quick break. Stay tuned after these brief messages here on Super Talk Mississippi. I'm Mandy Gunasekara, filling in for Gerard today, and we're coming at you live from the Element Wealth Studio. If you're thinking about or planning for retirement, do you have a plan? Go to myelementwealth.com or call 601-957-6006 to let Element Wealth help you find your balance between income, growth, and guarantee. Also, let y'all know Sports Talk Mississippi will be at Scruggs Farm, Lawn, and Garden in Saltillo today as they gear up for the upcoming Super Santa Saturday on November 23rd. Scruggs will have holiday specials throughout the store, including John Deere incentives and Gators at 0% interest for 36 months. That sounds like a great deal and a whole lot of fun, so y'all go check that out this weekend in Saltillo on November 23rd. All right, we are still joined by our own in-house political strategist for the day, my husband, in full disclosure, but the principal of our little firm in Oxford called Section 7 Strategies. So yeah, I get a lot of questions about where Section 7 came up, and this was your creation. Could you let folks know what is behind that name?
Sure. Article 1, Section 7 of the Constitution says that all bills for raising revenue shall originate in the House of Representatives, but the Senate shall confer and amend as with all other bills. It is the constitutional order or creation of the House Committee on Ways and Means, and the Ways and Means Committee is the only, other than arguably the Appropriations Committee, the two committees that are in the Constitution.
That's right. And you served as the chief of staff to a member who was a part of that Ways and Means Committee group. And so there you go. That is what the name is about. All right. What we're talking about is going through some of the appointments that have been announced. Just so y'all know, I am the way that I define things. People who have officially been appointed is whether or not they have officially been announced via press release on Truth Social at Real Donald Trump's Truth Social, which is where he's posting a lot of this information. Surya, your background with immigration and customs border protection. We're really excited about Tom Homan. Who else are you really excited about on the current list of folks that have been announced to be nominees for positions in the next Trump administration?
Yeah, so I'm most excited about John Ratcliffe because of the folks that Donald Trump has nominated thus far, he is definitely the best golfer. So John Ratcliffe, many people don't know this, was a Division I golfer at the University of Notre Dame. He still carries a respectable 5.1 handicap at Dallas National. And I've had the opportunity to play with him many times. He's a great guy and a good golfer. For somebody who is as good a golfer as Donald Trump, I've actually been pretty shocked that more of his cabinet nominees are not golfers. In fact, many of them aren't. John is really the exception. So I'll look for more golfers to be nominated as we move into the other cabinet positions.
All right, so any of our friends that are listening that are helping guide the president's transition positions, you've heard it from Surya. He would like to see some more golfers, and no doubt one thing that should be added on the list of qualifications is listing your handicap.
Absolutely. If you don't carry a handicap, like I was in the break, I was looking to see if Matt Gaetz has a handicap. He doesn't. I think his dad does, but he's not a golfer. Rubio is not a golfer. Waltz is not a golfer. Tom Homan is not a golfer. I mean, these are really, honestly, great, capable people. I think they'll do a fine job, but they're not going to get that FaceTime with the president if they're not golfers. And, you know, my locker is right next to the president's at Trump National D.C. I mean, that's really the only opportunity you'll get to see him if you're not in the Oval Office.
You're either on the official calendar or you're on the golf calendar. And that's the way that business is going to be done. What do you think about this? This was a story. It was a little bit tongue in cheek, but whether or not actually this did happen. Peter Doocy, the Fox News journalist that is always a part of the White House press conferences, he asked Karine Jean-Pierre yesterday whether or not during the president's discussion they had actually planned their golf outing that had been famously referenced during Joe Biden's horrendous and career-changing debate back a few months ago. Do you think they actually hashed that out?
I don't think they talked about that, but that is hysterical. I hope it happens. I think they would raise a boatload of money for charity. I would recommend Le Bonheur Children's Hospital or maybe St. Jude's, but they should absolutely do that. I think if President Trump gave President Biden, I don't know, 1 or maybe even 2 shots a hole, it wouldn't even be close. So I look forward to that. Hopefully they can make it reality.
I think that's a really good idea. And is it who was the golfer that he brought on stage during the gentleman who hosted the golfing video? Bryson?
DeChambeau.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, that's why I keep him around. But something like that, they could host one of those shows. What's the name of that show?
Breaking 50?
Breaking 50. Yeah, they could do one with President Trump and President Biden, hopefully former President Biden at that point. And I do think it would go a long way. And continue for the American people to actually see the other side of President Trump. Not everyone necessarily saw if you didn't have the opportunity to go brief them in it, even in very serious, high-stakes situations, whether it's at the White House in the Oval Office or to the side. But to see that, that charismatic, engaging side of him, I think that they should continue that throughout. All right, one other thing I want to talk with you about, we have talked about this for a long time together, but this is the Department of Government Efficiency. Are you excited that you've got both Elon and Vivek who are going to be running this? They've indicated that the public is going to be involved in this as well. What is your take on the Department of Government Efficiency? Do you think they will be able to deliver on their goal of significantly reducing the size and scope of the federal government by July 4th of 2026, which also coincides with the 250th anniversary of this great country? What is your outlook on DOGE?
Well, I think every member of the DOGE squad should go out and buy a copy of Y'all Fired, A Southern Belle's Guide to Restoring Federalism and Draining the Swamp. It provides an excellent outline on how to do exactly what they're setting out to do. It's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. That's a soft plug for you, Mandy.
Thank you.
No, I think it's a great idea. I think there are a lot of places that we can really reduce the size and scope of government. There are over 400 federal agencies. Elon has proposed to shrink that size to under 100, which seems very reasonable. I know there are similar conversations going on with the state of Mississippi as well. And I think, when you're talking about, using vast quantities of taxpayer dollars, we should really be figuring out what is the most effective way to allocate those resources.
Yeah, and they should, in the very least, be subject to audits. Let's like real audits, not the fake ones that are piecemeal and typically politically tinged that come from the Office of Inspector Generals across the board, or the little snapshots that Congress has to dig in. We need a very serious audit. It needs to be presented to the public in a way that is both transparent and digestible. I don't want to have a master's in finance, accounting, or budgeting to be able to understand what is actually being said with regard to the expenditure of taxpayer dollars. And I think that if anyone can figure this out, it certainly is Elon and Vivek. Vivek applying his principles as a businessman who found a way to root out wokeness that was undermining the financial health of the various companies he was a part of, and to effectively call that out nationally in a way that really gave people the words to hone in on what was this issue with DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, environmental, social governance, that kept popping up everywhere and was undermining not just the bottom line and profits of businesses, but pensions and investments and things along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest challenge with dealing with giant bureaucracies is that there is no profit motive. There is no incentive for reducing costs. And that is why we have the government we do today. I mean, if you look at having, you worked at EPA, I've worked at DOE, DHS, and DOD. Every year it's about increasing headcount. And then, the September fire drill comes where everybody needs a flat screen TV. So we, don't have to say that we didn't spend all our money. I mean, those are the cultural shifts that we'll need to see to really make a difference in this next Trump administration.
Yeah, I agree. And there is so much opportunity. Fraud, waste, and abuse is rampant, and we're going to finally get an accounting of what that actually looks like, and then what is going to be done with Elon Musk and Vivek at the helm. Well, Surya, thank you so much for joining us today on the show. On this side of the curtain, if you will, appreciate your time and your insight. For our listeners, we are going to have to take a quick break here, but we've got more to go through with cabinet appointments and positions that have been announced, what's the relative outlook, and a few other important stories percolating out there. So stay tuned. We have more for you on SuperTalk Mississippi.